why investment has been so poor over the last few years, all firms give us 3 or 4 reasons, right? You can talk about all the distorted tax incentives, lack of transparency. The number one reason over the past few years has been policy uncertainty. I mentioned one of the reasons why we're seeing a slowdown in exports over the past year or so is because of intensified competition. That was my point. Some of the top tier firms here in Bangladesh, particularly in the ready-made garment sector, are world class, right? But the rest of them are not. And that's simply because of some of the things you also mentioned. There's this anti-export and anti-diversification bias in trade policy at the moment, right? It creates perverse incentives, which leads to a stagnation of innovation. So this growth model, this idea that, what changed in 2016, I don't think anything changed. It's just the model that was there before. Some of the gains that you had from that model slowly started to evaporate, and that naturally happens. You'll reach a certain stage where you do need to then change and adapt and innovate and move forward. And I think Bangladesh has reached that point, which is why I said regardless of when Bangladesh eventually ends up graduating and then being exposed to more competition, though that debate began a while ago, and the responses to that debate in the form of policy measures should already be formulated, and firms should start thinking about what might happen, right? It's like riding a bike. Eventually, you have the training wheels, and they'll be needed to be taken off at some point. Otherwise, you will be overtaken because you'll be riding too slow, right? So, access to finance, infrastructure bottlenecks, access to electricity, water, all of these things. I didn't mention them because there was a long list, but these are in the report. These are also issues that need to be looked at. Whenever we speak about why investment has been so poor over the last few years, all firms give us 3 or 4 reasons, right? You can talk about all the distorted tax incentives, lack of transparency. The number one reason over the past few years has been policy uncertainty, right? Policy uncertainty. You cannot make a long-term decision about what to do with your firm if you don't know the direction of policy. Political uncertainty was another reason. Cost of capital was another reason. And then these power, infrastructure, supply chain challenges. Now, you've had elections, so to a certain extent, I'm hoping at least political uncertainty is gone. So now you're left with some of the other things. Policy uncertainty. My understanding is that the government will be releasing its 5-year plan anytime, maybe even today or tomorrow. The 5-year strategic framework, and then you've got a budget coming up in a couple of weeks as well. So hopefully this will lay out some of the steps needed to be taken, which were outlined more broadly in the manifesto that was released around election time.